I want to talk to you about the unique musculature of the Greyhound dog. This applies also to other breeds of sighthounds such as Whippets, Borzoi, Salukis, etc., but most literature out there has been done on Greyhounds. Dogs, I think, are so fascinating because they are one of the most physically diverse species in the world, and they're entirely man-made since the initial domestication of wolves. And just to give a bit of history, sighthounds were some of the first dogs selectively bred by humans, and it's actually believed that greyhounds date back as early as 2500 BC Egypt. There's a little bit of a contention with that. Some of the other oldest known dog breeds today include other sighthounds such as Salukis and Afghan hounds. So greyhounds were originally purpose-bred to hunt by sight and to catch game such as rabbits, squirrels, other small animals. Hare coursing originally became a very popular sport for greyhounds in the 1800s in Great Britain. Track racing, as most people know greyhounds nowadays, began in North America in 1926, and that kind of cemented the greyhound's fate. Nowadays, very, very few greyhounds are actually the AKC registered show variety that you would see in a dog show. If you personally have ever met a greyhound in real life, chances are that it was actually a retired racer. Greyhound racing is still popular in some parts of the country. I won't get into the concerns that people may have about that. There are some key anatomical traits that kind of signify sighthounds as being built for speed. First of all sighthounds have the special gait called the rotary gallop or double suspension gallop, and this means that all 4 feet leave the ground twice in one stride. This is the fastest gait in the animal kingdom. The current fastest dog in the world, according to worldsfastestdogs.com, is a female greyhound named Fanta from Australia who was clocked running at 50.5 miles per hour. Sighthounds also have the special deep chest that you've probably been able to distinguish like Whippets and Borzoi from other dogs because they have the super deep chest and a thin little waist, and those deep chests contain large lungs and a larger than normal heart compared to other dogs. The heart of a racing greyhound can be up to 1.2% of its total body weight. In comparison, the average adult human's heart is only about 0.5% of their total body weight. The larger lungs and heart can deliver more oxygen to the greyhound while he's running. They also have that unique thin, long skull. The word that describes that is called dolichocephalic. This is streamlined for speed, and you may remember from an anatomy course that mammals all have these kind of swirly shaped little thin bones on the inside of the nasal passage called nasal turbinates or nasal conchae, and these are what rapidly warm air as the animal takes it in before it goes to the brain. So there's more space for these nasal turbinates while the animal is rapidly breathing while running. They also have long backs with highly flexible spines. This allows the dogs to compress and release their bodies like a spring sort of action to leap forward while running. The epaxial muscles of the back and abdominal muscles facilitate this flexion of the spine, while the long whip-like tail acts as a rudder for making sharp turns. So I want to talk about 2 papers that help to illustrate the uniqueness of some of the muscle features of greyhounds. The first one is called Comparative Functional Anatomy of the Epaxial Musculature of Dogs Bred for Sprinting versus Fighting. And the epaxial muscles are just the most lateral muscles surrounding the spine. In this picture on the right, you can see the Staffordshire Bull Terrier, which I abbreviated as SBT going forward, is a really different shaped dog compared with the Greyhound. It's been bred for fighting historically, and you can see it is a stocky, very muscular, built dog with a sort of square-shaped head, a short snout, and wide jowls for gripping and holding. So in this paper, the group decided to compare this breed, clearly bred historically for fighting, with the Greyhound that was bred for sprinting. Their hypotheses were that the Staffordshire Bull Terrier's muscles would be better suited for strength and stability, while the Greyhound's muscles would be specialized for power production and spinal motion. Both breeds may exhibit differences in muscle architecture between regions of the vertebral column and between different muscle functional groups. This study looked at muscle groups from Greyhounds and Staffordshire Bull Terriers that were euthanized for reasons unrelated to the study. 13 muscles were dissected out for the study, and for each one they took down the muscle weight, muscle volume, the belly length of the muscle, and the fascicle length. All data was scaled in proportion to the dog's body mass so that they were able to easily compare the muscle sizes between the two breeds. It was interesting that they found that there's a significant difference in the mass of the medial longissimus dorsi between the two breeds. Although the longissimus dorsi muscle was the single largest muscle group in both breeds, it made up more than 50% of the epaxial musculature mass in the Greyhound. Most of the cervical muscles, that's the muscles around the neck, were larger in the Staffordshire Bull Terrier, and the thoracic region, which is like the top half of the spine below the neck and around the ribs area, those muscles were larger in the Greyhound. The color diagram on the left, labeled Figure 1, illustrates the muscle groups that this study looked at when comparing the two breeds. These muscles aid in flexion of the neck and trunk for running and also for biting down and holding on. On the right-hand side, we have graph A, which is depicting scaled muscle mass of each of the muscle groups we talked about, and then scaled physiological cross-sectional area in graph B. There were many statistically different sized muscles between the two breeds, as denoted by the asterisk above each muscle name, which indicates a significant p-value of less than 0.05. I hope it's clear. I wish they chose a color other than light red and dark red to depict this, but you can see that, as I mentioned before, the Staffordshire Bull Terrier had generally proportionately larger cervical muscles. So just as an example, the semispinalis capitis muscle is a major muscle of the neck, and on the left-hand graph there you can see the mass was much heavier of the semispinalis capitis in the Staffordshire Bull Terrier than the Greyhound. However, looking at the longissimus dorsi, which was noted to be much bigger in the Greyhound, the graph, and it's cut off because it actually goes much higher than the rest of the values. So there's looks like there's a white bar missing, but that's just denoting a gap in space. But if you look above that white bar that's missing, you can see that the longissimus dorsi of the Greyhound weighed a lot more than the Staffordshire Bull Terrier. So these are the main takeaways from the paper. Using a calculation of muscle power, it was found that the combined longissimus dorsi and iliocostalis muscle units, which are in the lumbar region of the back, they have the capacity to augment the power produced by the combined hind limb musculature by 12%. Although the hind limb musculature was not specifically examined in this study, the group hypothesized that while the leg muscles are specialized for power production, the epaxial muscles, which is the spinal muscles I just mentioned, seem to work in tandem with them to provide support and stability while running. The Greyhound featured muscle groups in the thoracic spine that were larger too compared to the Staffordshire Bull Terrier. This goes back to what I was saying earlier about the sighthound body's deep chest with large lungs. These thoracic muscle groups facilitate not only locomotion, but also ventilation, allowing a rapidly sprinting animal to breathe more efficiently. Again, the cervical muscles were larger in the Staffordshire Bull Terriers. This is suited to generating high forces with movements of the neck. In a dog that was bred for fighting, this makes sense as it's supposed to be able to grab and hold on for very long periods of time. The differences in muscling between the two breeds can likely be linked to intense genetic selection by humans for dogs who excel at either sprinting in the case of the Greyhound or fighting in the case of the Staffordshire Bull Terrier. This picture of greyhounds racing is just kind of a segue between my papers, but it's just a neat picture, and you can see how lean and muscular the dogs are, and I have a video at the end that is showing the dogs running in a race as well, if you're interested. The second paper that I want to talk about today is called Skeletal Muscle Fiber Composition in the Dog and its Relationship to Athletic Ability. It's kind of an older paper from 1981, but it was one of the first to look at muscle fibers in a dog. Previous studies had been done in humans and horses, among others, but people hadn't really looked at dogs as much yet. So this study looked at muscle fiber composition and activities of several muscle enzymes, and they used mature, healthy greyhounds, foxhounds, and medium-sized mixed breeds of either sex as well. These samples were collected from the deltoideus, triceps brachii caput longum, vastus lateralis, gluteus medius, biceps femoris, and semitendinosus muscles. The samples were of the same size and were taken from the same site and depth in each dog to help minimize variability. Histochemistry techniques were used to check fiber types. Talk about those a little more in just a moment. The sections of each muscle were tested for ATPase and succinate dehydrogenase, abbreviated SDH, to sort the fibers into either type 1 or type 2 and to examine the level of activity in the fiber. The way this works is that the intensity with which the muscle fibers react for myosin ATPase allows fibers to be classified as type 1 or 2, and the intensity of reaction for SDH divides fibers according to low or high activity. In the study, they were able to distinguish, for at least some of the samples, 3 types of fibers, corresponding to the 3 known types of fibers that we learned about in class: slow twitch oxidative, SO, fast twitch oxidative glycolytic, FOG, and fast twitch glycolytic, which is just the FG. Unfortunately, they were only able to sort the type 2 fibers into FOG and FG in some of the samples, so they were forced to sort of nix the type 2 differentiation part of the study. They only classified muscle samples based on high or low ATPase activity, meaning that the fibers were either type 1 or type 2. This chart from the study illustrates the percentages of high myosin ATPase activity in the fibers in the muscle sections that they looked at in the Greyhound, Foxhound, and crossbred dogs. And these numbers are really interesting because it illustrates how almost all of the fibers in the muscles that they looked at are fast twitch fibers in the Greyhound, varying from 88 all the way up to 99% of 99.8% actually of the deltoideus muscle was made up of fast twitch fibers in the Greyhound. You can appreciate how they have such a higher percentage of fast fibers than the other breeds in every category, with a significant p-value of less than 0.05 denoted by the asterisk. And again, these all are muscles in the limbs, which of course is the powerhouse behind the Greyhound's stride and a major reason why they're so fast. High glycolytic activity allows for an animal to run at high speed. As we learned in class, glycolytic fast-twitch fibers are for quick bursts of activity. Prior to when this paper was published, it was known that highly athletic humans and horses had much higher percentages of fast fibers than their less active counterparts. So this study just kind of helped to show that dogs are the same way. All greyhounds have a high percentage of fast twitch fibers in the muscles of their body, as they are all bred to be really fast sprinters. The foxhounds in this study, interestingly, had lower proportions of fast twitch fibers in some of the muscles compared to the mixed breeds, and the researchers in this study hypothesized that is likely due to the fact that foxhounds are bred to run at a pretty low to moderate speed, but for many hours. So this makes sense that they would have not all fast twitch fibers like the greyhound, who's a sprinter, but that they would have some of the slow oxidative for sustained energy release as well. To summarize some of the advantageous greyhound breed traits that I've talked about throughout this presentation, the number one and most noticeable physical trait is the anatomical advantages. As I've talked about, the body is very thin and streamlined with long legs and deep chest. Also, in the 1981 paper by Guy that we just went over, it was hypothesized that greyhounds are so lean also because of the high proportion of fast twitch fibers in their muscles. Fast twitch fibers, especially the fast glycolytic or type 2B, utilize carbohydrates instead of fat as their main energy source. So the animal wouldn't have much need for excess fat, and that's why they're so lean muscled. They have that high proportion of fast twitch fibers, which we just talked about. And actually, the same paper also found that there was very minimal variation within a muscle between animals. So the study only looked at 6 greyhounds. It wasn't a huge sample size, but it was found that among racing greyhounds, pretty much all these dogs are built very similarly and are very fast. Greyhounds also have proportionately larger muscle groups compared with other breeds, which we touched on in the first paper. The epaxial muscles surrounding the spine improve the power of the rear legs for propulsion. They also stabilize the spine to support the spring-like body motion when propelling the dog forward. Thoracic muscles around the deep chest improve ventilation for rapid breathing, and these are all improvements on the greyhound dog compared to other breeds. I originally had YouTube links in here for more information, but because I had to actually upload the video to YouTube, you wouldn't have been able to click the links in the video. So if you're interested in seeing videos of the dogs running, there's a really cool slow motion video of a greyhound running on a beach that illustrates the double suspension gallop I talked about earlier. If you type in greyhound galloping slow motion on YouTube, it's like a 14-something minute video. It's really long. It's just the dog running in slow motion for a super long time, but you can just watch a little bit of it. And then you can also search Greyhound race in YouTube to pull up plenty of racing videos. Most of the races are less than 2 minutes because they're so fast, and they're just kind of usually one circuit around a track. So that's really cool to see too. I'm neither condemning nor supporting greyhound racing. I just wanted to include that because it is something neat to see the dogs flying around at top speed.